She was beaten with firewood, left broken and silent. But what happened next shocked the whole village. Karma didn't just punish her abuser, it burned her house to ashes. You won't believe how one girl's pain turned into the most powerful revenge Zawuto has ever seen. Zawuto was a quiet town, the kind where everyone knew each other, and secrets barely stayed buried. The air smelled of dry earth, and red dust clung to every wall and window. Mango trees lined the paths, their branches heavy, as though weighed down by the stories they'd witnessed. In the heart of Zawuto stood a large house, painted white once, now faded with time. It belonged to a man named Jagon, but it was the little girl inside who made people whisper. For years, that house was filled with tension, sorrow, and muffled cries that no one dared to speak of. Then, one night, everything changed. A fire broke out just before dawn. Flames tore through the wooden roof like a beast finally freed. Neighbors gathered, watching in silence as the house collapsed into itself. No one tried to save it. They didn't even speak. Only one sound broke the stillness. A scream, not of pain, but of something deeper. It wasn't terror. It wasn't even fear. It was release. By sunrise, the house was gone, just ashes blowing in the wind, and one single slipper at the gate. The elders said Karma had entered that home barefoot, unnoticed, and left it in flames. No one mentioned names, but the villagers remembered the girl with sad eyes. They remembered how she walked with her head down, how she never smiled. Now she was gone, and in her place stood silence. Not the silence of guilt, but the kind that comes when truth finally speaks louder than lies. The kind that comes after freedom. The people of Zawuto didn't know what really happened that night, but they knew one thing for sure. The scream they heard wasn't from the fire. It was from the soul finally set free. Yara was only 7 when her world fell apart. Her mother, Kasumi, had gone into labor on a quiet, windy night. The neighbors heard the midwife's hurried steps and the distant cries from the house. But by morning, everything was still. Kasumi was gone. The baby didn't make it either. Just like that, Yara's laughter faded from the town of Zawuto. She sat on the front steps for days, her small fingers clutching the hem of her mother's last wrapper, her eyes staring into nothing. Eyes that looked calm but carried storms, like rain clouds just before they burst. Her father, Jagan, was a man of routine. He fished every morning and smoked his catch every evening. He didn't know how to raise a child alone. He barely spoke to Yara after the funeral. And within 3 moons, the women of Zawuto began visiting with baskets of food and forced smiles. Jagan chose one, a woman named Belma, with skin like oil and a voice like cracked stones. The town whispered that it was too soon, but Jagan didn't listen. He wanted warmth in his bed, someone to clean, someone to forget the past. Belma moved in with loud footsteps and louder rules. She didn't look at Yara with love, only with cold eyes that sized her up like a problem she didn't ask for. Yara was pushed out of her own mother's room, her clothes replaced with torn hand-me-downs. Belma took over everything, the kitchen, the house, and slowly, Jagan's heart. He started coming home later, drinking more, and when Yara tried to speak, he waved her away like a buzzing fly. Belma didn't waste time showing her true face. She made Yara sweep the compound before sunrise, fetch water until her arms ached, and eat last if there was anything left. She slapped her for walking too slow, shouted when she coughed, and once even cut off her hair with a kitchen knife, calling it a nest for flies. When Jagan saw the marks on Yara's back, he turned his face. "She's your mother now," he'd say, but she wasn't. She never would be. Yara stopped speaking much. She walked with her head down, her small feet barely lifting from the ground, but her eyes never lost that quiet storm. They watched everything, every lie, every bruise, every silent night she cried into her mattress. The mango trees outside her window seemed to lean closer, as if they wanted to protect her, but they couldn't. Still, she endured. Even when Belma locked her outside during a thunderstorm, even when Jagan forgot her birthday, even when she fell sick and had to crawl to the river for water, Yara stayed quiet. But inside her, something was growing. Not anger, not hate, but something stronger, something waiting. The town noticed. They said the girl with rain in her eyes never cried. They said she walked like someone carrying a secret too heavy for her age, but they didn't ask questions. They never do, till the fire. Maduma arrived with a bag full of perfumes, loud rappers, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She came from Kalumi, a town far away, where no one in Zawuto knew her history. That made it easy for her to create a new one. She introduced herself as a woman of strength, of loss, of beauty, and she knew just the right words to win Jagan's attention. Her gold earrings flashed in the sun, and her laugh was the kind that made people look twice. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. From the very first night, Yara felt the change. The air inside the house grew heavier. Maduma took over the bedroom, the cooking, and slowly, the man Yara once called father. She cooked with too much pepper, knowing it made Yara cough. And when Yara's eyes watered, Maduma smiled as if she'd won something. She walked like a queen through the house, her heels clicking like warnings on the floor. To the villagers, Maduma was elegance. She greeted them sweetly, brought extra stew to the elders, and even gave coins to children at the well. But when the door closed behind her, the sweetness disappeared. By the time Yara turned 9, the little that remained of her childhood had vanished. Maduma started locking up her school books, saying girls like you don't need to read. When Yara cried, she laughed. She sold Yara's few clothes in the market and bought new jewelry for herself. She told Jagan that the girl was unlucky. Ever since she was born, you've known nothing but sadness, Maduma whispered. Your wife died. Your baby died. That girl, she carries darkness. Jagan, tired and broken from years of grief, began to believe it. He didn't argue when Maduma made Yara sleep in the storage room, or when she ate leftover bones while they feasted on smoked fish. He started looking at his daughter like a burden. And Maduma, she made sure the gap between father and daughter widened each day. Her words were poison, and she fed them to Jagan in small, steady doses. Neighbors who once waved at Yara now looked at her with pity or turned away. The girl who once sang with birds now walked silently past the market stalls, carrying baskets too heavy for her small frame. Maduma didn't need to beat Yara to hurt her. Her weapon was silence, exclusion, and manipulation. She erased the girl's presence in her own home. But Yara saw everything. She watched how Maduma charmed the villagers, how she twisted her lies like threads into Jagan's mind. And though she didn't speak of it, her eyes held the storm, quiet, watchful, waiting. The house felt colder even under the sun. The mango trees stopped blooming. The nights were filled with whispers and footsteps. Something was changing in that house, and it wasn't just Maduma's presence. It was the weight of injustice piling up like dry wood, waiting for a single spark. The sun had barely dipped behind the hills when it happened. The sky was still glowing orange, and the smell of smoked fish filled the air. Inside the house, a pot of stew bubbled on the fire. Yara, just 11, had spent the afternoon scrubbing cassava roots and fetching water from the stream. Her arms ached, her feet were sore. In her tiredness, she forgot to cover the pot of stew before stepping outside to fetch firewood. When Maduma walked in and saw flies hovering around the food, her scream tore through the house. "You useless girl!" she roared. Yara ran back inside, already trembling, but she knew it was too late. Maduma's face twisted in fury as she grabbed Yara by the arm and dragged her into the backyard, where the ground was bare and hard, the place where chickens scratched and weeds never grew. The sun was watching, so was the wind, but nothing stopped what came next. Maduma tied Yara's small hands with a rope and threw her to the ground. Then, with a heavy piece of firewood, she began to beat her, not just once, not twice, over and over, until the wood cracked and Yara's back turned red, then dark, then wet. The sand drank her blood. The mango tree nearby stood still, as if too stunned to sway. From the next compound, old Namora heard the screams, or rather, the lack of them. Yara didn't cry, not a sound, not a whimper, only the sharp thuds of wood against flesh filled the air. Namora opened a crack in the fence and peered through. Her heart pounded. She wanted to run in. She wanted to shout, but her mouth stayed shut. Everyone in Zawuto feared Maduma. They said she had eyes like poison and words that cursed. So Namora closed her gate and whispered prayers instead. Inside the house, Jagan wasn't home. He was out fishing by the river, unaware that his daughter's skin was being torn open under his mango tree. And even if he had been there, would he have stopped it? Or would he have looked away, like everyone else? The village heard the news by morning. A market woman said she saw Maduma washing blood from her wrapper. A boy whispered he found broken firewood beside the tree, but no one said anything. No one asked questions. No one knocked on the door. When Yara walked to the well the next day, her steps were slow, her eyes were swollen, her lips split, and her back hidden beneath a loose wrapper. But she stood tall. She didn't limp. She didn't bow her head, and she still didn't cry. Her silence was a sound the village couldn't forget. It thundered louder than the evening drum. It shook even those who claimed not to care. In a village where pain was often hidden behind closed doors, Yara's quiet defiance was a scream none could unhear. From that day on, something changed in Zawuto. The wind felt heavier. The birds stopped singing near that house, and the ground beneath it started to remember. Yara's voice disappeared like smoke in the wind. She still had her tongue, still had her breath, but words no longer felt safe. They had failed her too many times. When she spoke, Maduma twisted her words into lies. When she cried, no one came. So Yara chose silence, not out of fear, but as a shield. It was the only thing Maduma couldn't twist or control. She moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes heavy, her back aching, but her lips sealed. She no longer slept in her small corner room. Maduma had thrown her out after another small mistake, claiming she didn't deserve a bed. So Yara now lay on a mat near the coop, beside clucking chickens and the smell of feathers. The ground was cold, nights were colder, but she never complained. Even when her bones ached, even when her skin shivered, she kept her silence. The house had 4 rooms, but none belonged to her anymore. At mealtimes, Maduma served herself first, then Jagan, and if there was anything left, she'd toss a scrap of yam toward Yara, like feeding a stray dog. Some nights, Yara got nothing, but she never begged. Her body grew thinner, but her spirit stayed upright. Still, every night, as the sky turned dark and the house went quiet, Yara lit a small clay lantern she had hidden behind an old basket. She kept it close, away from Maduma's eyes, and before she lay down, she would slip a tiny piece of folded paper inside the flame's glow. On it, written in small, neat letters, was one word: wait. It was her secret. She had written that word months ago, the day after the firewood beating. Her hands had still been sore, her back raw, but something inside her had refused to die. That word became her promise, her anchor, her quiet rebellion. She didn't know what she was waiting for: freedom, justice, a miracle, but she believed it would come, one day. Sometimes, she would open the paper, stare at it, and then close it again. Just that one word gave her the strength to get through another day. She never told anyone, not even the chickens who clucked beside her every night. The lantern was her only friend now, and the flame, no matter how small, was her reminder that her story wasn't finished. The villagers saw her, but didn't see her. They passed by her in the market, whispered about her silence, and called her the cursed girl when they thought she wasn't listening. But she heard. She always heard. And still, she said nothing. Because Yara knew something they didn't. Pain can break you, but silence can build something stronger. She was not broken. She was waiting. Soro came to Zawuto on a dry morning when the wind carried the scent of dust and pepper. He wasn't like other traders who shouted for buyers. He sat quietly under a purple umbrella, laying out his spices in neat little piles: red turmeric, gold nutmeg, crushed tiger leaf. People noticed the silver beads woven into his turban and the way he leaned on a crooked stick made of old baobab wood. But what they remembered most was his silence. He didn't talk much. He listened. He watched the market like it was a story unfolding. And in that story, he saw something others ignored. He saw Maduma yelling, her voice loud and sharp like a blade. He saw Yara flinch and stumble, her small arms shaking under the weight of firewood and yams. He noticed how no one helped, how no one even looked directly at her. The villagers turned their faces, afraid of Maduma's rage. But Soro didn't. As the day passed, he moved closer to her, not with words, just with his eyes. He watched the way Yara's shoulders tensed whenever Maduma's shadow fell on her. He watched her lips stay shut, even when her feet bled. And most of all, he noticed her eyes. Eyes like the rainy season, full of silent storms. That evening, long after the market cleared and the sun dipped behind the Zawuto hills, Soro didn't leave with the other traders. He waited. He followed the path of pain back to Jagan's house, where the lantern glowed faintly near the chicken coop. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He simply walked to the corner where Yara slept and placed a small cloth pouch beneath the lantern's light. Inside the pouch was a mix of things that didn't seem special at first. A bit of healing balm, made from ground tiger leaf and lion root, strong enough to soothe bruises but gentle on a child's skin. A folded leaf with crushed marula bark that smelled like comfort. And a smooth black stone, carved carefully with one word: soon. When Yara found it later that night, her fingers shook as she opened the pouch. She held the stone in her palm and stared at the word for a long time. Just one word, but it felt like hope. She didn't know who left it, but she felt seen. For the first time in many moons, she didn't light the lantern out of habit. She lit it with purpose. She placed the new stone beside her old paper that said, "Wait." Now there were 2 words, 2 promises. Wait. Soon. That night, she slept with the pouch close to her heart, and far from the noise of the village, Sorrow sat beneath a tree, grinding tiger leaf under the moonlight. His eyes were calm. His stick rested beside him. He didn't need to ask questions. He had already smelled the truth in the air. Something was wrong in that house. But he also knew this: truth always finds its voice. And sometimes it begins with a single word. The wind came first, loud, angry, and swirling dust through the narrow paths of Zawuto. Thunder followed, deep and growling like an old drum, shaking rooftops and rattling windows. It was the night of the great storm, the kind that made mothers light candles and whisper prayers. Jagan, as always, was out on the lake, chasing fish beneath the angry skies. He didn't know what waited at home. He didn't know what would change forever in the next few hours. Maduma stumbled into the compound, her steps loud and careless. Her breath smelled of sour palm wine, and her eyes were red, not from tears, but from fire inside her. The bottle in her hand slipped and cracked on the ground, but she didn't stop. Rain began to fall, but she didn't feel it. All she saw was Yara, curled up near the kitchen's dying fire, using a torn wrapper as a pillow. The girl looked peaceful, and that made Maduma furious. "You little witch!" she spat, her voice slurred and sharp like broken glass. She kicked over the pot of soaked beans and marched toward the pile of firewood stacked near the hut. Her hand grabbed the thickest stick. She raised it high, eyes wild with hate. But before it could land, something happened that no one expected. A hand stopped her. It wasn't Yara's. It was old Namora, the quiet neighbor who always watched but never spoke. She had slipped in through the back, drawn by a strange feeling in her chest. She held Maduma's wrist with a grip that was stronger than her old bones should allow. Maduma screamed in shock, but Yara didn't flinch. She rose slowly, her eyes not filled with fear, but something deeper, something free. Then she screamed. It wasn't loud because of pain. It wasn't a cry for help. It was the kind of scream that carries every broken piece inside a person. It was years of silence, let out in one long sound that broke through the night like lightning. It tore through the storm and echoed across the village. Goats cried. Birds flew up from their trees, scattering like paper in the wind. Babies woke from sleep. Doors flew open. And all of Zawuto paused, because they had never heard Yara's voice before. Not like this. Not this powerful. Maduma fell to her knees, her wrist still trapped in Namora's grip. Her eyes blinked in confusion, her lips moving but no words coming out. The villagers rushed toward the house drawn by that scream. They came with lanterns, with questions, with eyes wide in shock. And when they arrived, they saw the truth. They saw the firewood on the ground. They saw Yara standing tall. They saw Maduma trembling. No one said a word, not yet. But in that moment, something broke, and something else began. At dawn, the village of Zawuto woke to a thick, smoky sky. The sun struggled to rise behind the dark clouds of fire and ash. Neighbors hurried toward the smoke, drawn by the crackling sound and the sharp smell of burning wood. Maduma's house, once proud and tall, was now a raging wall of flames, licking the sky. Windows shattered, and wooden beams collapsed in sparks. The fire was fierce, but no one saw anyone inside. No cries or shouts came from the burning house, only the angry roar of the flames. Villagers stood at a distance, hearts pounding, eyes fixed on the burning home. The fear and shock of the night before still hung heavy in the air. People whispered, but no one could explain what had happened to Yara or Maduma. Both were gone, without a trace. Some hoped Yara had escaped, but others feared the worst. The mystery of the burning house was not just about the fire, it was about what was lost and what remained. Outside the gate, something strange caught their eyes. A neat pile of firewood stood untouched. It was the same thick sticks Maduma had used to punish Yara, but now they were calm, still, as if waiting for something. It was the only thing left undisturbed by the blaze, a silent reminder of the past cruelty. On the doorstep, the villagers noticed a single slipper lying in the dust. It was small, worn, and belonged to Yara. Next to it lay the stone, Sorrow's stone, that had once been etched with the word soon. Now, under the morning light, the word had changed to enough. It was as if the stones spoke for Yara, saying she had reached her limit and could bear no more pain. The villagers looked at each other, realizing this was more than just a fire. It was a message. The house burning was a sign that the cycle of suffering had ended. The silence after the scream had turned into this powerful moment of change. Stories spread quickly across Zawuto. Some said the fire was a punishment from the gods for Maduma's cruelty. Others believed Yara's spirit had become a fierce protector, bringing justice in a way no one could stop. The neighbors who once ignored the abuse now faced their own guilt for staying silent. As the smoke cleared, the villagers gathered near the ashes. They saw not just a burned house, but the beginning of a new story. A story of courage, of silence broken, and of the power that comes when pain turns into strength. Yara's name, once whispered only in fear, was now spoken with respect. No one knew where Yara went, but her fire, the fire that destroyed the house, burned brighter in every heart in Zawuto. It was a fire of hope and a warning that cruelty would never be hidden again. And in the quiet ash, the stone's word, enough, reminded them all that sometimes the strongest voice is the one that comes after the silence. 3 days after the fire, the village of Zawuto was still shaken. Whispers floated through the dusty streets. Where was Yara? Some feared she was lost forever. Others hoped she was alive and safe. Then, just as the sun began to dip low, Yara appeared. She walked calmly into the village, clean and strong, holding sorrow's crooked walking stick. Her eyes, once filled with storms, now held steady like a clear sky after rain. The villagers stopped and stared, silent in awe. Yara didn't rush or stumble. She went straight to the circle of elders, the men and women who carried the village's wisdom and justice. For the first time in many moons, she spoke. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying the weight of all she had suffered and survived. She told them about the bruises hidden beneath her clothes, the cruel lies whispered by Maduma, and the beatings that left her bleeding on the hot sand. She shared the story of the fire that had burned the house, explaining how it was not destruction, but a breaking point. The moment she decided she would no longer be silent. The elders listened carefully, their faces a mix of sorrow and anger. They had been the silent witnesses for too long, but now they faced the truth head on. They knew this was more than a family matter. It was a test of their community's heart and justice. They called for Jagan, Yara's father, the respected fisherman whose love was clouded by Maduma's poison. When Jagan arrived, the weight of the truth hit him hard. Seeing his daughter's scars, the silent proof of her pain, he dropped to his knees, shame and regret flooding his heart. He realized how blind he had been, how easily he had let his new wife's lies poison his love for his own child. As for Maduma, the elders sent messengers to find her. She was discovered hiding in a small village nearby, nursing burns on her arms. The fire had not just destroyed her home, but had burned away her pride and power. She had nowhere to run, no strength left to fight. When Maduma was brought before the elders, her silence spoke louder than any defense. The people of Zawuto watched as justice was finally served, not with harsh words, but with the truth shining bright. The elders declared her punishment fitting for her cruelty, reminding everyone that evil never stays hidden forever. Yara stood tall during the judgment, no longer the silent girl who endured pain alone. She had reclaimed her voice and her place in the village. Her courage to speak the truth sparked a new respect in Zawuto, teaching all that no one should suffer in silence, and that justice begins when truth is told. The village slowly began to heal. Jagan promised to protect his daughter and rebuild their home with kindness and respect. Yara's story became a lesson whispered to every child and shared by every elder, a story of pain, fire, truth, and ultimately hope. The ruins of the burned house were no longer a sign of tragedy, but a symbol of courage and new beginnings. After Maduma was driven out of Zawuto, the village felt a weight lift from its shoulders. Her exile was more than punishment. It was a promise that cruelty would not be allowed to live here. Jagan, broken and filled with regret, fell to his knees before Yara, tears mixing with the dust at his feet. He begged her to forgive him for the blindness that allowed the pain to continue. With a heart heavy but ready to heal, Yara accepted his apology. In a powerful gesture, Jagan handed Yara the deed to their land, a symbol of trust and a fresh start. But Yara's new home wasn't built with bricks or stones. It was built with something much stronger: peace. Every corner echoed with kindness, and every breath inside was free from fear. She didn't just rebuild a house, She rebuilt her life and her spirit, and she made sure everyone knew that healing was possible, even after the deepest pain. Every month, Yara lit a lantern by her doorstep. Inside, she placed a small piece of paper. It no longer said, "wait," the word she had clung to in silence. Now it said, "healed." That word shone like a beacon to the whole village, a message of strength and victory over suffering. The house that had once been swallowed by fire now stood stronger than ever, not just because it was rebuilt, but because it was filled with hope and courage. It became a place where stories of pain turned into stories of triumph. It was a home that whispered to every child in Zawuto that even the darkest nights end with light. People in the village no longer spoke Maduma's name with fear or anger. Her shadow faded into the past, a warning that cruelty never wins. Instead, they spoke Yara's name with respect and awe. They told the story of the little girl beaten with firewood, who never cried out loud, but whose silence was louder than thunder. They spoke of how Karma walked barefoot into her life and walked far, burning the house of her abuser, yet leaving Yara untouched. Yara rose from the ashes, not as a victim, but as a symbol of justice and hope. Her story became a legend in Zawuto, a reminder that pain does not last forever, and that karma always finds its way. In every corner of the village, her courage inspired people to stand up, to speak out, and to believe in the power of healing. Her life proved that no matter how deep the wounds, strength grows from within. Yara showed the world that true power lies in forgiveness, in rising again, and in walking forward barefoot with the quiet but unstoppable force of karma behind you. If Yara's story touched your heart, then remember this: no matter how dark your struggles may seem, there is always hope waiting to rise from the ashes. Just like Yara, you have the strength inside you to overcome pain, to heal, and to find peace. Don't let anyone's cruelty define your future. Your silence can be louder than any scream, and your courage can change your world. If you know someone going through a hard time, share this story with them. Let them see that they are not alone, and that healing is possible. Sometimes, all it takes is one small light in the darkness to show the way forward. Your support can be that light. Please, if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories of hope, strength, and the power of justice. Every story we tell is for you, because everyone deserves to feel seen, heard, and inspired. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this journey with us. Your kindness and support mean the world. Together, we can spread hope, heal wounds, and remind the world that no matter what, karma always walks barefoot, but walks far. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and remember, you are never alone.